Hello, my name is Judy Stevens, and I'm here I'm just giving you an open shot of the community that I live in, and we're going to start to talk about Martha Nussbaum's Cultivating Humanity. Nussbaum promotes the idea of a liberal education that is the cultivation of a whole human being for the functions of citizenship and life in general, as opposed to a traditional monolithic education that trains people to be good consumers and obedient servants of the state. I have a personal example of a liberal education that I think Nussbaum would applaud. When I was 18 years of age, I joined a youth program funded by the federal government during the Trudeau years. It was called Katimavik. It was a 9-month program that brought together young people from across Canada. We lived together and we worked in 3 communities. Highlights for me included making friends with people from Nova Scotia, BC, and Quebec, developing French language skills, learning how to bake bread on a wood coke stove, being billeted with a trapper, and working with Native students at the school in Fort Chippewa, Alberta. This program helped me to develop an awareness and appreciation for the diversity of the culture of Canada, and I think I'm a better citizen because of it. Nussbaum also talks about 3 components of global citizenship that need to be encouraged in education. Since I'm an artist and an art educator, I'm going to try and illustrate her points with my art and the stages that I went through in my art over the past decades. Number 1 is critical examination of oneself and one's traditions, seeing oneself as not only a citizen of some local region or group, but being tied to other human beings through recognition and concern. Number 3, the narrative imagination or empathy, walking in another person's shoes. So we're going to go into my house, and I am going to show you how I've sort of explored these issues in art. Going up the stairs, and that's my dog. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the first pieces that I did when I first came out of art school. I had the opportunity to travel, and these are pictures that I did from life when I was in northern Italy. So as you can see, it's sort of a study of a culture by looking at the place, the landscape, as well as the architecture. I took out the people, and I took out things that would indicate technology, so it kind of gives you a bit of a history of the place. So this is Terlano, Italy. So that was an interesting exploration. Loved the detail, and I was kind of fascinated by nature. Something happened, and I went through an identity crisis, as one can say, and this caused me to do an examination of self. Okay, I started to realize that I had taken myself out of the equation, that I was trying to look somewhat objectively at the world outside of me, and I didn't include myself. And this crisis came it came about with the birth of my child. So here I am. I mean, this illustrates it perfectly. I'm looking at myself. I'm looking down at, I think they call it belly gazing or something like that. Sort of got into larger pieces. This is also a painting of myself, but I also used a bit of slide projection to actually do it. And I'm going to open the door into my bedroom, and this is the last piece in that series where the identity is starting to become more integrated with the background. So at the end of these pieces, I sort of had an understanding, although it might be somewhat abstract, of who I was. So that sort of ended a period. So that sort of talks about the self-examination. I think the Italy pieces also talk about looking at different cultures. I'm going to go into another area once I was done with that, I was started to become fascinated by people in relationships. And so I did some pieces that really kind of talked about relationship and compassion. So I think that sort of brings in the empathy component into my work. I was going through some difficult times, and I was lucky that I had people around me to give me support. This one has to do with, I think it's a song, something about it's only castles burning. So it was a personal crisis that I went through. It felt like my dreams had just kind of, they hadn't worked and they were destroyed. But I was able to through the help of others, see that they were just castles burning in the distance and they weren't really real to begin with. So this led me to another project that I'm working on. This is kind of my studio space where I'm actually collecting stories from women who've experienced violence. And unfortunately, I started a sculpture, but it's way up here. And those are in pieces, and I'm actually going to try to put in works that and stories of women who have, like myself, experienced violence. So it's kind of like a little bit of an activism piece. So I'm finding myself, now that I've examined relationship, I am moving into like more collaborative pieces. Another example of collaboration are these drawings here that I did. I was working on a book with my dad, and I illustrated it, and he wrote a book about the history of his family, and he did a lot of archival research. He kind of brought the figures to life. That's his great granddad and his grandmother, and these are some of the pieces. I had to do a fair bit of research, and that's my father. I also wanted to talk about how I think that the art curriculum embraces all these kinds of things that I talked about. And I'm just going to read out some pieces. I brought out some examples of student work here that I will talk about in a few minutes, but I just took some quotes. Here's quotes directly from the curriculum. Students experience and develop awareness of artworks from various times, places, social groups, and cultures. Okay, so that fits in with empathy and awareness, or gives a possibility to that. And students demonstrate understanding of the roles, purposes, and meanings of visual arts in the lives of individuals and communities. That goes along with empathy as well. Students analyze their own and others' artistic compositions, so that includes critical thinking and the possibility for discovering who they are in themselves. It doesn't talk specifically about empathy or development of identity, but these are things that I can encourage in my classroom. So on the stairs here, I've got some pieces. I mean, I think this one with the magazine collage clearly illustrates identity. That's the actual silhouette of the student. Self-expression also leads to identity. Here are a few examples. We also study other cultures, their kind of art making, and this is a take on the group of 7 native art that I often study with my students in grade 5 and grade 6, and we use this kind of brown paper because the Ojibwe and the Cree used to do their artwork on birch bark, so it kind of imitates it. So just getting them to imitate the work of other cultures is a way of placing students in the shoes of the other peoples. And we also look at the why they do it, what's it made out of, those kinds of things. How did it happen to be? And students have the opportunity to imagine that they're in that kind of space themselves as they create. So hopefully it helps them develop a better understanding. Another thing is I've done work with in regards to social, political issues. Students have done posters in Photoshop with me in regards to environment, mental stuff, and things like poverty and famine and those things as well. So as you can see, this brings us to the end of my discussion about Nussbaum, and I hope that you appreciate my interpretation. Thank you very much, or my contribution, I should say. Thank you very much.